Hello, all you subjects of the internet. I am the Aromantic Shipper, coming at you today with yet another video. So I have been working on moving forward to new content on this channel outside of short, funny edits for shows because copyright is a fucking bitch. Seriously, I worked so long creating my BoJack Horseman Come Sweet Death AMV and I can't even play it on YouTube because it has too much content from the view from halfway down. But anyway, I have gotten into doing rewrites of shows that I am a fan of instead. I am still getting through my monstrous Walking Dead rewrites, and last week I uploaded my video detailing all the minor alterations I would make to the original Avatar: The Last Airbender series. And now I'm going to be working on my rewrites of Avatar's sequel series, The Legend of Korra. A show which, despite some of the hatred it gets, I actually think is one of the best shows out there. At least in the West, and has a pretty good follow-up series to the original, for the most part, as Legend of Korra has quite a few issues, and even though it has really high highs, it also had some noticeable lows. There were a lot of missed opportunities and stuff that just didn't really work in the series, with the love triangle nonsense in the first two seasons being, in my opinion, the most unpleasant aspect to sit through. Overall, what we got was pretty great, but the series had the potential to be much better, and in my rewrite, I am going to be laying out all the alterations and additions I would make in hindsight to the series for a more complete final product. Of course, this is all my opinion, and if any of you have any ideas for rewrites you think would make this series better, be my guest and drop them in the comments below. Just like with my previous rewrite videos, I will be going episode by episode, but unlike in my Avatar: The Last Airbender rewrite video, I will definitely be making more major alterations while still keeping the overall story mostly the same. Anyway, let's just get to it. This is my rewrite for Season 1 of The Legend of Korra. Let's just get to it. So, for some Avatar fans, Season 1 of The Legend of Korra is actually their favorite season of the show. But when The Legend of Korra ended, I actually looked back on Season 1 as my least favorite. The reason for thinking so boiled down to there not being that many bender-on-bender fights, there not being a ton of lore revealed, the love triangle stuff, which as I said before I hated, and the fact that pretty much the entire season was just spent in one location, Republic City. However, while Season 1 still isn't my favorite, and I prefer Seasons 3 and 4 much more, I can see why so many people love it, as it does a pretty great job as a first season setting up the new characters and the new world they inhabit, with a tight story that constantly moves forward, except for Episode 5. The main two issues I would say it has are 1, the love triangle stuff as I said before, and 2, the ending, which was complete fucking bullshit and wrapped things up way too quickly and easily. But there are still quite a few things I would change other than those two things about the first season. And I would stretch the first season out to 16 episodes rather than the original 12 in order to better flesh things out. So then, in Episode 1, things play out pretty similar to the original and the same content is covered, but with some minor additions and a significant change to Korra's lineage. In my rewrite, she is actually the great-granddaughter of Zuko, as one of Zuko's daughters ended up marrying the chief of the Northern Water Tribe, and there are reasons for this change that will be clear throughout the video. It's not just fanfic. When Korra is young, she is able to firebend, which doesn't come as much of a surprise to her parents considering her lineage. However, then she starts earthbending, with earth and fire being her easiest elements to bend, while she struggles more with water but is able to get the hang of it, having Katara and Kaya as her teachers, with Kaya actually being in this season at the beginning, along with Katara, since she was supposed to be staying with her mother after Aang died. And when the White Lotus go to see Korra, she doesn't immediately blow a hole through the wall and say, "I'm the Avatar, you gotta deal with it." Instead, she is respectful to the White Lotus members at first, until they start diminishing her, and then she starts earthbending and firebending, and proclaiming that she is going to grow up to become the greatest Avatar of all time, and everyone is going to know of her legend. Speaking of mismatched bending elements, I would actually change the bender status of Tenzin's kids. It's kind of ridiculous that a guy who's half water tribe and has a non-bending wife and brother somehow hit the lottery and wound up with all of his kids being airbenders. In my rewrite, only Jinora is an airbender, with Ikki being an earthbender, Milo being a firebender, and Rohan going on to become a waterbender, with Pema being from the city of Yudao and having both Earth Kingdom and Fire Nation ancestry. However, they are all raised in airbender culture by Tenzin, just the same, and still wear the airbender clothes like the Acolytes. Also, I think it would be cool to have Katara tell Jinora she's writing a book, cataloging her adventures with Aang and Team Avatar, with it being heavily implied that that is the reason she narrates the beginning of every episode of Avatar. When Tenzin later says that he has to go back to Republic City and can't train Korra, Kaya remarks on how important big city Tenzin is too busy to stay and train the literal reincarnation of his own father. When Korra decides to leave for Republic City, Katara as well as Kaya, who's much closer to Korra than in the original series, both see her off, and she doesn't say goodbye to her parents and tells Katara not to tell them about her escape plan, because as we find out in Season 2, Korra's dad wanted her to stay locked up in the South for her own protection, so it makes no sense why he would just be fine with her leaving. Other than that, I actually wouldn't change much about how the episode plays out from there, though with the line from Tenzin about how his sister is a bad influence on Korra, and that of course she was okay with her escape plan, before Korra then mentions Katara. Then, of course, the episode would end with Tenzin deciding to let Korra stay to train with him. Also, this isn't necessarily regarding this episode, but I have a few things I want to lay out first. It's really confusing how the political system in the United Republic works. I would make it more clear in this season by saying that the outside political leaders like the Water Tribe, Earth King, and Fire Lord once had a say in how the fledgling nation was governed until it became fully independent. Republic City is its capital city, and it's where the leaders live, including its Council of Five, which are made up of one Earthbender, one Firebender, one Waterbender, one Airbender, and one Non-Bender, who are supposed to represent the diverse interests of the people and push for cooperation amongst the different ethnic groups, and are responsible for governing both the whole country and the city, and are chosen by a small group of electorates. The United Republic itself is a somewhat loose confederation of territories that pay taxes to the central government and have the same military, but are relatively independent in many ways. Also, I have to talk about the look of Republic City. In the original series, Republic City looked impressive, but kind of bland, as it was almost entirely just a 1930s New York setting. Republic City should have a much more unique design, especially if we are going to be spending an entire season there. It should still have a more modern look, of course, but it should also show how the architecture and culture from the Fire Nation, Earth Kingdom, and Water Tribes blended together to create something incredibly unique that just wouldn't be found in the real world. Also, that announcer guy doing the recaps of each episode is just really cringy and annoying. Instead, the recaps would just be like they were in Avatar The Last Airbender, with Aang and then later Tenzin after the Avatar cycle ends, announcing previously on Avatar, and then the clips just being played in full color. In Episode 2, it starts with Korra's introduction speech to the press that happened at the end of Episode 1 of the original series, and in my rewrite she goes pretty overboard, letting the attention go into her head, saying, "I vow to be the greatest hero this city has ever seen, and the greatest avatar this world has ever seen." And then, of course, it would cut to Ammon listening on the radio. Then the episode would play out quite similar to how it does in the original, with some added comments from Korra during Tenzin's training, saying that her previous bending instructions weren't anywhere near as strict as him, telling her what to eat and what to wear. When Mako first realizes Korra is the Avatar, he doesn't call himself an idiot, because that was just weird, and Bolin fanboys over her way more, like he does with Lord Zuko. Also, maybe Mako is less of a freaking jerk and emotes more. His character was not really that pleasant to watch in the original, so in my rewrite he is more of a dry wisecracker who's a bit full of himself, and isn't scowling constantly all the time. But he does get really serious when the situation calls for it, and he's a bit socially inept and not great with dealing with emotions. Rather than just burning all the revolving doors in that leafy obstacle thingy Korra is trying to make it through, Korra instead demonstrates her physical strength by breaking through to the other side. And then later, when Korra goes back to Tenzin at the end of the episode to apologize to him for what she did, Tenzin says that it's not that important, as the Air Acolytes will have it fixed in a day, cutting to them painstakingly putting it back together, splinter by splinter, with Tenzin saying, "Even I don't have that kind of patience." Also, the episode does not end with Mako and Korra looking longingly at each other through their windows. In Episode 3, this is where I start to make some pretty significant changes and additions rather than just nitpicks. I think the first 2 episodes of The Legend of Korra are almost perfect at setting up the show and the season, but I can't say the same for the other 10 episodes. Episode 3 of the original series will actually be split up into 2 separate episodes in my rewrite, as I will be adding a lot of stuff that wasn't in the original series. Firstly, the episode actually starts off with some gang members threatening some non-benders. And then Ammon comes out of the shadows like the goddamn Batman with his equalists to save them, and dole out some vigilante justice. He actually saves a little non-bender kid's life, immediately establishing that he is a much more complex threat than Ozai, and after he captures the gang members, he tells the non-benders to join his cause and invites them to the revelation. Afterwards, Chief Beifong finds the gang members that Ammon captured with the firebender tied up with rope, simply repeating the words, "He took it." Cut to Mako actually explaining the rules of pro-bending to Korra, which never happened in the original, leaving us all just confused as to what the fuck was happening. Then, of course, the team would need to find some more money to cough up for the championship pot, but in my rewrite, it actually wouldn't be that big of a deal. Mako says that his factory job, which is actually a cabbage corp in my rewrite, should be more than enough to cover it, but Bolin, wanting to make more money for himself rather than just letting his big brother do everything, goes off on his own shenanigans. Mako's relative ease at making money would be contrasted with the non-benders of the city, as we see many of them living in poverty, unable to find good work, and one pregnant mother praying to the spirits for her child to be a bender so that they can escape their life of destitution. After Mako clocks out of his factory job, he runs into a group of poor non-bender thugs who harass him, saying that it must be great to make so much money so easily as a bender, and they try to steal his cash, but he fights them off without even using his bending, telling them that he earned everything he made and that they should do something with their lives rather than complaining. Then we get to the stuff with the triads. I always thought it was a complete missed opportunity how the original series almost never capitalized on the bending gangs in Republic City, and it would have been really cool to see more of them. In my rewrite, Bolin and the gangsters don't just get captured off screen. Instead, through him, we get introduced to all of the gangs and bosses that are temporarily allying together because they are in danger. Bolin asks Shady Shin why they need so much security from the police, but he tells Bolin it's not for the police, and they don't have to worry about them. The police arrest us, we pay the bail, we get our guys back, and the police get funding. Everyone goes home happy. But there's this new guy on the scene called Ammon, who has, get this, a gang of non-benders who've been kidnapping a lot of our guys. Some he leaves for the police to snatch up, but we still don't know where most of them are. Bolin is of course shocked at how non-benders could possibly threaten the Republic City gangs. Then we actually get to see Ammon and his Equalist attack, and they are immediately established as a legitimate threat, capturing all of the gang leaders at once and taking Bolin. Meanwhile, back with Korra and Mako, we see more examples of citizens living in poverty, just like the kid that bribes Mako for information. And then Mako and Korra try to rescue Bolin. The episode ends with them getting their asses kicked by the Equalist goons. In episode 4, when Korra and Mako wake up next to each other, Korra is clearly really disgusted, asking Mako why he would do that. I'm actually cutting out every single scene in the original where it's implied that Korra and Mako like each other, like when she is teased by Iki last episode about liking him, she doesn't act flustered and more just looked annoyed. And in this episode, she doesn't hold Mako pretending they are together while they are going to an Equalist rally. I am cutting Makora completely out of the story because it's a completely pointless and cringe ship and they are just friends. Another small addition I would make is that after the Equalist speaker tells the officer that the Avatar is oppressing him, the officer actually tells Korra that it's fine, and the guy has been getting on his nerves all day, showing yet again how non-benders in this city don't get any respect. Ammon's speech at the revelation is more extended in my version, listing specific examples of how people have used bending for evil purposes in the past, like how the citizens of Ba Sing Se are oppressed and subjugated by the entirely bending force of the Daily police. He then starts spitting facts, listing out the statistics about how despite benders being in the minority, the 8 richest people in the city are benders. Benders are on average 4 times wealthier than non-benders. Benders are 10 times less likely to live in poverty. 50% of media personalities and journalists are benders. 80% of politicians are benders. 4 out of 5 of the council members are benders. 90% of the police are benders, and every leader of the Republic City gangs are benders. And most of their goons are benders, with the people they extort being mostly non-benders. He says that Republic City was supposed to be a place where all kinds of people could be seen as equal, but it has instead become the most unequal society in the world, with the bender elite controlling everything, and that his message of equality will reach far outside of the city, and then to the rest of the country, and then the world. Then he starts taking the bending of the gangsters, and when he gets to Bolin says that there's been a big mistake and he isn't actually one of them, but Ammon says that it doesn't matter and he's a bender, so his imperfections must be purged. Then Korra and Mako escape with Bolin, but this time Ammon tells his Equalist to bring Bolin back rather than just letting them go. Another chase ensues, and the police show up and save them, and then bust down the door on the Revelation event, FBI open up style, and the Equalists scatter with the police arresting many of them. And then Korra tells Tenzin about what she saw, and it cuts to the council meeting with Tenzin, Tarlock, the earthbending representative, the firebending representative, and Raiko, who is in Season 1 of my version. Also in my rewrite, the council members outside of Tenzin and Tarlock actually have personalities and are not just rubber stamps. They are less radical and power-hungry than Tarlock, but ultimately hold his same belief, that benders are superior to non-benders, and often vote with him, while Raiko, who is a member of the Equalist political party in my rewrite, is obviously more partial to representing the will of his non-bender constituents, and Tenzin often votes with him, due to the airbender belief in freedom and equality. In their meeting, Tarlock viciously attacks Raiko, saying that of course he is siding with Ammon, and maybe he should lock him up as well, seeing as how he is an equalist, and that he can't understand how important a person's bending is to them as a non-bender. The episode then ends with Tarlock getting approval on his little task force. Also, speaking of Tarlock, in the original series there was an offhanded mention of his daddy Yakone by him, but in my rewrite Yakone would be mentioned much more frequently as a name feared far and wide throughout the city, as a monster who terrorized the entire city with his bending, with Ammon talking about Yakone as well to his followers and how he was only stopped because the Avatar took his bending away. In episode 5, the scene where Bolin tells Mako he is planning on asking Korra out actually happens here rather than later, and Mako acts like a cocky bastard, telling Bolin that the ladies fall head over heels for him without even trying, and Bolin doesn't have anywhere near his charm. Then he gets hit by Asami's motorbike and has himself vindicated as he gets a date with Asami in like a minute. Then the episode on Korra's end plays out pretty similar to the original, with her suffering from PTSD after seeing Ammon for the first time, and Tarlock trying to convince her to join his task force to make himself more popular. Also, when Korra is eating with Tenzin and everyone else, she complains that there isn't any meat, and then Tarlock comes in trying to play Korra by bringing meat. Things with Asami and Mako go quite differently, however. They go on their date, and things seem to be going pretty well, with Mako telling her about how he is a pro-bender, and Asami saying how much she loves listening to those games. Then Mako asks her when she would be free again, and she says she is pretty busy, and that being rich isn't exactly the easy life, and that she is a very active member of the Equalist Party. Then Mako starts freaking out at her, questioning how she could possibly be a member of those thugs, and why she would even want to go out with him if she hates benders, and Asami gets really angry at him. She then educates him on how the Equalist Party isn't anything like Ammon's radical faction, but the media is trying to make it out like it is, and the main figure is Councilman Raiko, and that the party stands for equality under the law and more opportunities for non-benders. She then gives Mako the standard social justice lecture, with Mako clearly not being very interested or knowledgeable about politics, but putting in the effort to try to understand Asami and reconsidering some of his previous biases. They then bond over the fact that they both have dead parents, with Mako's being killed by a waterbender in my rewrite, because for real, firebenders can't be the only killers in this universe. And Mako tells Asami that he had it rough too, as he grew up on the streets and had to do everything he could to protect his little brother. But he also understands that he had certain advantages in life that non-benders didn't. Asami tells him that the Equalists aren't anti-bender, and she isn't against bender sports or other jobs that use bending, but she wants non-benders not to be seen as lesser or inferior to benders. Then later she takes Mako to a political march led by Councilman Raiko, whom Mako is introduced to by Asami, with him saying that it's great to have an ally for the cause. They are protesting the radical actions of Ammon and saying how he is dragging the good name of the Equalists through the mud, and they run into more radical Equalists booing and hissing at them. A scene where Mr. Sato decides to sponsor the Fire Ferrets never happens in my rewrite, because as I said before, I'm cutting that plot point, and instead Mr. Sato is introduced later at the gala Korra is invited to by Tarlock. Tarlock ends up sparring with Mr. Sato, as it is clear that the two despise each other, but they act polite and civil with the environment they are in, both bragging about their accomplishments towards opposite ends. In my rewrite, Sato had to constantly struggle throughout his life, and was put down for being a non-bender, but was able to pull himself up and become successful all by his own efforts. There are also more scenes of Korra being complimented and fawned over by the bending elite, with them telling her that they feel safe from Ammon because she is there, and Korra not being able to handle it, and going off to stuff her face. Also, Tenzin does not bring his frickin' kids to the gala, and only his wife Pema as a +1. There should probably be more scenes with them in Season 1, though, to make them feel like actual characters. Like before, in this episode, Iki demands that Korra bring the cute firebender back to the island. In my rewrite, Asami actually introduces herself to Korra alone this time, without Mako there, as she approaches her after seeing Tarlock talking to her, and the two of them really hitting it off. And Korra clearly having a crush on her, and getting really turned on when she pulls her away from the crowd and gets close and starts whispering into her ear. As I said before, Korra isn't a thing in my rewrite, and Korra is actually a lesbian who develops a massive crush on Asami right off the bat. Back to the substance of what happens, though. Asami tells Korra that she should stay away from Tarlock, and that she and her dad have been keeping an eye on him for a while, and he is nothing but a slimy, power-hungry politician who will do anything to get what he wants, and that if she joins his task force, it is going to come back to bite her. Korra listens to what she has to say, and then Mako shows up, revealing he is dating Asami, with Korra clearly being very disappointed. Then, of course, Tarlock manipulates Korra using the power of the press to get her to join his task force, with Asami looking very disappointed, and the episode ends there. In episode 6, it of course showcases Tarlock and Korra working together to fight Equalists, only this plotline is much less rushed than in the original series, where it's shown over time how Korra's new job is affecting her life, with her being praised by the media as a hero, but it makes her airbending training and her pro-bending career more difficult. There's also an unrelated scene where we get to hear an asshat commentator on the radio explaining how non-benders just need to stop being so ungrateful, as benders are the reason why their country is so great, and it's just a fact that non-benders are inferior to benders. And then bringing in a token non-bender to tell them how right they are. Yeah, I'm not exactly going for subtlety in the political commentary in my rewrite. There's a scene where Asami meets up with Korra again and tells her about what she is fighting for, and how the Avatar is supposed to stand for justice for all people, and that she might need to do things in the future that will be unpopular. Korra tells her that she needs to do this, and Asami tells her that she finds Korra interesting and wants them to be friends. Then we get the scene with Korra talking to Pema that happens later in the original series, but of course with Korra having a crush on Asami rather than Mako, and trying not to let out to Pema that she is gay, but questioning her on what she should do if the person, quote, isn't interested in people like her, with Pema kind of catching on and saying that she should just ask and be herself. Then Ammon ends up hijacking the radio again, and it is him that challenges Korra to a one-on-one fight without help, with Korra agreeing to fight on Air Temple Island, thinking exposure therapy will cure her fear, with Mako and Bolin trying to talk her out of it, unlike in the original series. Ammon shows up and captures her, and I would actually make some additions to his speech to her to make it more iconic. Rather than just saying that their showdown is premature, he tells her that right now he is trying to gain as much public support as possible, and fighting against the propagandistic media attempting to paint him as an evil scumbag by only targeting violent criminals. His challenge to Korra is merely a demonstration to her that she is less than nothing to him. It won't stop with the criminals and gang members. After I'm done with them, I will come for the police officers. I will come for the sports players. I will come for the journalists. I will come for the politicians. I will come for the military. And finally, I will come for you, young Avatar. Your fate was sealed the moment you stepped foot in this city, and I can't wait for the day to come when you finally lose everything. There's also an added detail of the Equalists taking photographic evidence of their confrontation, as the police lie and later cover it up, saying Ammon never showed up in order to make it seem like Ammon isn't as dangerous as he really is, to hold on to power. Then, of course, the Equalists leave, and Korra breaks down to Tennyson for the first time, and then there's an actual scene where Korra tells Tarlock she is done with his task force, with Tarlock saying she's going to regret that, and then announces it to the press with them turning on her. However, Tenzin and her friends console her. Then the episode ends. In episode 7, it would be covering the events of episode 5 of the original, Spirit of Competition. Though, since that episode is probably the worst of the season, I will be making some major changes. It opens up with a pro-bending match, with Korra saying she's feeling much better getting back to basics, but she still sees people in the audience carrying signs saying, "The Avatar is a hero, not a sports player." And then the scene where Bolin is hitting on Korra plays out. Then Asami comes in congratulating her boyfriend Mako, and with them acting all lovey-dovey, Korra starts getting pretty jealous. Then Bolin ends up asking her out on a date, saying that she deserves to relax and get her mind off things. And she agrees, but makes clear to Bolin that it's not a romantic date, but Bolin clearly still thinks it is. Then their date plays out pretty similar to the original, with an added bit of dialogue from Korra about how she is going to uppercut Tano in the jaw. But then the night keeps going on, with them getting closer and closer, and bonding over more things like their love of lifting, and Bolin opens up more to Korra about his past with Mako, while Korra talks about how she was cooped up in the White Lotus compound pretty much her entire life. Meanwhile, the episode shows more of Asami and Mako's interactions, with Mako having a proper introduction to her dad, and Mako being quite nervous, while Mr. Sato kind of puts pressure on him, asking a lot of questions, and although he says he is fine with Mako, it's clear he's holding some resentment against him. For some reason. Asami then tells Mako that her dad is just really overprotective of her, and he grew up pretty poor but worked as hard as he could to get an idea he had off the ground, and make it so that his daughter would have a much better life than he did. Meanwhile, back with Korra and Bolin, Bolin becomes more and more infatuated with her, and while they're looking down at the city, he asks her if she will be his girlfriend. Korra, of course, tries to let him down in the gentlest way possible, with Bolin thinking her saying no is just because he isn't good enough for her. But Korra tries to imply the fact that she isn't into guys to him before just coming out and saying, Bolin, I'm gay, I like girls, since he obviously wasn't catching on. He is disappointed but does respect her and her wish to keep that information private, and Korra encourages him, saying that he is a great guy and one day he's going to meet someone who's going to completely fall for him, like Aang said to Mai in Season 1 of Avatar. Korra being gay rather than bisexual in my rewrite would provide an explanation for why she doesn't get together with Bolin, as those two were honestly cute as heck together in the original series, and their interactions in this episode will serve to further develop their great friendship. And this also means that I'm completely cutting out all the cringy stuff in the original series, with the team dynamic being thrown out of whack and Bolin having a fucking meltdown. He needs more respect. Bolin has a conversation with Mako afterwards, telling him it didn't work out, but he is moving past it, and they have another match and see Tano and the Wolfbats crushing their opponents, getting nervous for their upcoming fight against them. Also in this episode, there would be a side story with Lin Beifong getting more screen time and added scenes, showing the lengths she is going to try to take down Ammon, and Tarlock being annoyed that she is not taking orders from him. And we also see the connection and care she has for her officers, while also not being afraid to reprimand those that get out of line. This episode ends with Ammon's announcement that he will be attending the pro-bending finale, looking to fight the winners. In episode 8, things would play out pretty similarly to how they do in the original, with Lin volunteering to take charge of security at the pro-bending game, and Korra finding out that Tenzin used to be dating her. I would actually change the two's interactions in this episode, with it being more vitriolic than in the original, where Lin was acting oddly composed when she was talking to Tenzin. In my version, when Tenzin tries to apologize to her, Lin snaps at him, telling Tenzin he did more than just break up with her. You were cheating on me with that acolyte for 5 months, and you didn't tell me. I didn't tell you because I knew how you would react, and I was right. You went completely ballistic and tore the Air Temple Island to pieces in a fit of rage. They argue a lot more, but they later do end up coming to an understanding, with Tenzin saying that what they had wasn't healthy, and they fought constantly, and he loves his wife, but still cares about her and wants to be in her life, as they have known each other since childhood. Lin then apologizes for how she acted towards Tenzin, and says that when he told him about Pema, she was at a bad place in her life. Sue left, her mom left, and she didn't have anyone to turn to except for him, and it felt like she was losing everyone close to her. The pro-bending match plays out, but the Wolfbats don't just cheat their way through, because in the original it was just kind of ridiculous that the top team was nothing but a bunch of cheaters. Instead, they overwhelm the fire fair and square, and during Korra and Tano's one-on-one, Korra actually uppercuts him straight out of the ring, saying, "Told you." It is only after this, and the fire ferrets beginning to find their stride, that the Wolfbats do resort to minor cheating, but it isn't so obvious in my rewrite that the announcer just plainly calls it out. The Wolfbats win and the Equalists attack, with a scene beforehand with some suspicious people ordering some fire flakes from a vendor, putting Equalist gloves in the bags, which is how they're sneaking them in and distributing them. Lin does not get electrocuted and is saved by Tenzin, and Korra also doesn't get electrocuted by the lieutenant, leaving them the only ones who can fight, and Ammon doesn't somehow come out of the floor. Instead, he drops down from the sky from the blimp after the glass is shattered. When Ammon is taking Tano's bending and he's begging for mercy, he says, "Please, my bending is everything to me," to which Ammon responds, "Perhaps it's time to learn what it's like to live with nothing." I would add a few things to Ammon's speech, like him saying how non-bending sports aren't nearly as appreciated as bending sports, and also him finally revealing how he captured Korra and could have easily taken her bending away, but spared her on a whim, and photos are distributed all throughout the audience that were taken of Korra and Ammon's previous confrontation as proof. Also in my rewrite, Korra is still suffering from PTSD, so she doesn't just charge at Ammon to go after him. Instead, she only does it to assist Lin, who goes after Ammon first, and the two actually end up capturing Ammon's lieutenant. Then the episode, of course, ends with Tenzin's line, "Republic City is at war." In episode 9, it starts out with the scene at the arena where Korra is talking to Tano, and Tano describes what it was like having his bending taken away, and that it felt like he wasn't in control of his own body, and says how he doesn't even know who he is without his bending anymore. Korra tries to show him compassion, telling him that he is still worth something without his bending, while still clearly being very concerned about losing her own bending. Then, of course, Korra tells Bolin and Mako that they can stay with her on Air Temple Island, and they say that Asami invited them to crash at her place, with Korra being more excited about going there than in the original. This will be what I am going to refer to as the Korra simp episode in my rewrite, with Korra just continually simping more and more over Asami, as she finds out how cool she is, with her being an awesome stock car racer and taking self-defense classes, and also there's an added scene of her showing everyone the Manor Gym, where they all work out and get sweaty together. And by the time they sit down to dinner, Korra is so turned on that she says she has to excuse herself to go to the bathroom for 30 minutes. Meanwhile, we get scenes of the press turning on Beifong for her failure at the arena, just as Tarlock wanted. And she suspects that the Equalist radicals must have a wealthy backer, and go to investigate the two wealthiest non-benders in town, Hiroshi Sato and the owner of Cabbage Corp, finding Cabbage Corp guilty. In my version of events, Hiroshi is not so suspiciously nice to the police, and tells them to stop harassing him, just like Asami does. Also, Mako has a discussion with everyone about how weird it is that the Cabbage Corp guy was a supporter of Ammon, as though he was a non-bender, he was apparently a simp for benders, utilizing benders for most of his factory labor, in contrast to Hiroshi Sato in competition with him, who strictly used non-benders, which makes Korra more initially suspicious of Hiroshi, and also Lin tells Korra beforehand that she should use the opportunity she has to check to see if Hiroshi is up to anything, which she is kind of uncomfortable about. This episode is used to portray how extreme police methods can be with little regard for the due process or proof, serving to show the divide between benders and non-benders even more so. Meanwhile, back at the bathroom, Korra is trying to get a hold of herself, saying, "She's with Mako, and you don't even know if she likes girls. Why did she have to be so perfect?" Then Asami comes in to do her makeup, and afterwards, that's when Korra tries to use that powder or whatever the fuck it is to look prettier. Then she gets lost in Asami's giant mansion and intentionally overhears Hiroshi Sato talking about how they are ready to strike. In my rewrite, the main question to ask is not whether Hiroshi is working with Ammon, but is whether Asami is too, as she acts pretty suspiciously throughout the entire thing, constantly defending her father against any accusation, and even Korra starts to suspect her. Korra then gets into an argument with Mako, saying that he has to see past his feelings and how there's something going on with Asami, and then this exchange between the two takes place. Okay, Mako, let's review. You meet this girl, right? And this girl is so hot and nice and good-hearted and talented and smart, and she smells like flowers, and she's a great driver, and then she just coincidentally falls into your lap after coincidentally hitting you with her motorcycle. You don't think that's a little suspicious? What if she was just intentionally trying to get closer to me? I don't want to hear it, Korra. You're just saying this because you're jealous. Jealous? What? That is a ridiculous accusation. Jealous. Ridiculous. There is no way. Wait, who am I jealous of exactly? You seriously think I don't know? It's obvious you're in love with me, Korra. Yes, you're so right. You're completely right. I've been trying to hide my feelings, but I just can't deny them. You are fantastic at reading people, Mako. Yeah, Mako isn't exactly the best at reading social cues, at least when it comes down to stuff that don't have to do with serious situations, and he thinks way too highly of himself. Anyway, then the episode plays out like how it does in the original, with them finding the secret tunnel underneath Hiroshi's workshop, only this time the police actually allow Mako and Bolin to come with them because of bender privilege, while Asami is told to stay back and is guarded by 3 officers, as they obviously don't trust her. And before the gang goes down, Asami asks Mako if he believes her, and he says he does, but that her father isn't who she thinks she is. And then when they get down, Hiroshi appears in his machines. I also have to talk about something real quick, which is the fact that platinum in this series is broken as fuck. I mean, platinum is supposed to be a rare metal, but people in this universe basically keep spamming it non-stop with platinum cuffs, platinum mechs, platinum giant mechs. It's pretty ridiculous. In my rewrite, the existence of metal benders has necessitated the development of a man-made synthetic polymer that protects against metal bending, since purified metals like platinum are so rare. So that is what Hiroshi would be using, and what the other villains in this series use when spamming metal bender-proof shit. The episode would end with Hiroshi staring down the Avatar, and the police saying that he likes it in his mech, where his odds are a little more equal. After which, Asami knocks out the 3 policemen guarding her upstairs, and goes down into the bunker, with it being a question as to what she is going down there for. In episode 10, there is of course the fight between the mechs and the Avatar and friends, who are defeated, with the mechs getting a lot more damaged, and Hiroshi saying that he will have to make some improvements. But then Asami comes down, revealing that she wasn't allied with Ammon and simply wanted to believe her father was telling the truth, but always had some doubts about him, as she would hear him look down on benders, calling them slurs under his breath. She would tell her father that he is betraying everything they fought for, and that they will never be treated equally if they resort to terrorism. However, Hiroshi hits back and says that radical action must be taken, and that Ammon accomplished more in a few months than Raiko did in a decade. This is hardly violent terrorism. If anything, it's incredibly peaceful as far as revolutions go. What do you think I'm going to do to your friends, huh? Kill them? No, I'm just going to take them to Ammon to have their bending taken away from them, so that they will be normal like the rest of us and not superpowered freaks. And what about these weapons? They aren't lethal. Here, I'll demonstrate. He then shocks the Equalist next to him, who says, I'm okay. Hiroshi then pleads with Asami that they had good intentions but never got any results, and that Ammon can lead them to victory without even any deaths. But of course Asami still betrays her father and saves the main characters, getting them out of there all by herself while they are all still immobile, with Hiroshi writhing on the ground demanding that the Equalist not hurt his daughter. After they escape, Asami is obviously horrified at what she's just witnessed, and Korra apologizes for doubting her and admits to Beifong, telling her to spy on her father. But Mako, who believed in her the whole way through and knows her much better, is in the end the one who is able to comfort her when she needs it most. And Korra finally accepts that Mako is probably better for her, and she tells Asami that she wants them to be friends, and she is welcome to stay on Air Temple Island. The Sato basement is searched, but Sato, his machines, and the officers have already been relocated. And in my rewrite, even after Lin loses her officers, she does not resign, yet. Instead, she goes over to interrogate the lieutenant who was captured. But a bomb goes off in the police station, and he is set free, and Lin is greatly injured, meaning she is physically unable to go back into the line of duty, which gives Tarlock his golden opportunity to instate his #1 police fanboy, Saikon, as acting chief in her place. Tarlock, of course, asks Korra to join his task force again, and taunts her about not being able to use airbending. Tenzin then posits to Korra later that it's very rare for an avatar to be so unable to use one element, but it's also very rare to be able to use 2 of the 4 elements so naturally. And he says that it's possible Korra's connection to the other elements might be blocking her connection to air, so in order to airbend, she might have to stop using the other 3, as foreshadowing to what will happen later. Then, when it gets to the scene where Korra breaks down crying, she explains to her friends that she came to the city with so much determination and optimism, and how she doesn't even know what she is supposed to be doing, or what her role is supposed to be. Her friends try to comfort her, of course, and Asami says that nothing productive ever came out of feeling sorry for yourself, and she says that she wants to fight against Tarlock's propaganda by showing the public that there are those who support equality and civil rights who also oppose Ammon, and suggest fighting against Ammon's men. In the first season, Asami is really the most active character of the group, as opposed to in the original series, where she didn't have nearly as much connection to the plot. So Team Avatar goes out, and Milo doesn't fart on their hand before they do, and also fart bending isn't a thing in this series, because why? And they do Tarlock's job for him, with Asami being the goat, and basically being the only reason they make it through okay. Tarlock threatens to have them arrested, and Korra calls his bluff. Then, of course, Tarlock goes to more extreme measures, issuing his curfew and proposing many new anti-equalist laws, which Raiko is obviously disgusted by, and Tenzin calls him out as authoritarian. However, the other 2 council members agree with him that extreme measures need to be taken to defeat Ammon, and the laws are passed, and then Raiko later stages a non-violent civil disobedience protest. And of course, the new Team Avatar shows up to see the police oppressing citizens, and Tarlock has Mako, Bolin, Asami, and even Councilman Raiko arrested, and the episode ends with the new Team Avatar being broken up. In episode 11, it of course begins with Korra trying to get her friends unarrested, but getting nowhere, and there is an extra scene of the council discussing what should be done, and the other 2 council members agreeing that Tarlock went too far in arresting Raiko, but perhaps he should be temporarily suspended for the council for breaking the law, an obvious effort to provide less roadblocks to their authority. Tenzin tells Korra to not do anything rash, and so do her friends when she visits them in prison. But Korra, being Korra, of course takes matters into her own hands and confronts Tarlock. Their confrontation goes pretty much the same as it does in the original, with it being one of the best scenes in the show, but she does also repeat Asami's words to her about how the Avatar has to do what's right and not just what's popular. The fight is also more bloody, with Korra bleeding from the cuts Tarlock gives her, and Tarlock getting a bloody nose and bloody mouth after Korra punches him in the face, flinging him several feet backwards. Side note, I said how it would be cool if in The Last Airbender, Zuko kept the injuries he sustained when the ship blew up and Azula cut his face as scars until the end of the series, and I think it would be cool if a similar thing happened here, where Korra would receive visible scars on her body from Tarlock, Unalaq, Zahir, and Kuvira to show how much she has been beaten down. Since we barely got to see any of it in the original series, it would have actually been nice to see Tarlock driving on his way to Korra's new prison to get a look at the countryside of the United Republic and the other locales within it besides just Republic City. Then, of course, it would cut to the aftermath of the battle and the false evidence planted by Tarlock, but then it would cut to Ammon being reunited with his lieutenant and Hiroshi there as well, asking how he managed to break him out of prison, to which Ammon responds that he didn't, and looking over the news of Korra's disappearance, he declares that they have gained the unlikeliest of allies. Meanwhile, Lin, who has somewhat recovered, gets Asami, Mako, and Bolin out of prison and tries to get back his chief of police as soon as possible, but she keeps getting blocked by a bunch of excuses by Saikon. We then get more introspection from Lin as she considers just quitting her job altogether, as it doesn't make her happy, and she isn't even sure the police are in the right. But then she looks at a picture of when her, Toph, and Sue were still together, and proclaims that she is not just going to give up when things got too hard to take like her mother did, and she will see this through to the end no matter what it costs, and no matter how she has to do it. So she goes with Tenzin, Mako, Asami, and Bolin to get her officers back and find Korra. The sequence would play out pretty similar to the original, but obviously with Mako not being super obsessed over finding Korra like in the original, and having the same mutual concern for her as a friend that everyone else does, with Bolin probably having the most concern for her since he is the closest to her. But this time Ammon is there, and they are all trying to get away from him too. Also in this episode, things get quite a bit more tense as a statue of Zuko is destroyed, with Ammon sending out a message to the people of the city to stop worshipping the bending elite, as if they were gods who could do no wrong, and that benders like Zuko did nothing to address the systematic equalities between benders and non-benders in the city. After that, in response, a Sokka statue in the city is destroyed, which ends up injuring civilians who are protesting the anti-equalist laws during the day, sparking outrage. Sokka and his legacy in the Legend of Korra was never really focused on too much, but in my rewrite he is basically seen as a hero and an icon by non-benders, as he was able to contend on equal footing with legends like the Avatar and the Fire Lord. Meanwhile, Korra, who has been banging on the metal box long enough for her hands to turn blue, finally realizes that she can't get out and calms herself, finally being able to see an unclouded vision of Aang, and decides to see where the flashback leads her. In episode 12, Korra, of course, experiences the flashbacks of what happened to Yukon, and they go pretty similar to how they do originally, but with some changes. Firstly, I would have loved to see all 5 members of Team Avatar in the original series at the trial of Yukon, including Zuko, and more importantly Katara, who would obviously have a lot to say about bloodbending. And you know what, for good measure, throw Suki in there as Sokka's wife too. It is also made clear that Yukon has basically united all the gangs and black market activities under his rule, becoming the richest man in the world outside of royalty. Thus, he is able to rig every trial for him, and that's why the case is so important, as to attract the attention of all of Team Avatar. Also, Aang's confrontation with Yukon goes differently too. Rather than knocking everyone out and running away for some reason, Yukon starts taking control of everyone, and Katara tries to fight back against him, but even she is overpowered. And Yukon is about to choke the life out of Aang before he enters the Avatar state and breaks free of his grip. And then a full-on fight ensues, with Yukon using Aang's compassionate nature against him, and animating people, including his friends and wife, to attack Aang, and block Aang's attacks for him as meat shields. He also starts breaking people's arms and threatening to rip their heads off if Aang doesn't surrender. It's incredibly difficult, and a lot of people get gravely injured by Yukon, but Aang is able to defeat him and save everyone by taking his bending away. Then, after Korra finishes the vision, as she wakes up, she hears Aang's voice saying, "Beware, Korra, they will come for you as they did for me." Back in Republic City, I would actually add a few things. Tenzin does not just immediately suspect Tarlock of capturing Korra. Instead, Lin enacts an investigation secretly on what happened, and Mako, showing his own detective skills, is able to piece together, using the evidence and deductive reasoning, that Tarlock not only kidnapped Korra, but also had to be behind the lieutenant's escape from prison, and has been carrying out false flags and blaming it on the Equalists. They, of course, go to confront Tarlock, and the squeaky-voiced guy spills the beans, and then Tarlock escapes, but as his truck is driving away, Ammon is seen watching from a distance. Then Ammon's confrontation with Tarlock happens, with an extra line about how he has served a useful purpose for him up until now, and unlike in the original, Ammon does actually chase after Korra, with Korra doing everything in her power to get away from him, and getting even more injured in the process. It's Tenzin who carries Korra after she gets back, and not original series creepy Mako, and Korra is really just incredibly thankful to see everyone there after everything she's been through. There would be a council meeting with all the council members shocked at the fact that Tarlock was secretly a bloodbender. However, the Earthbender and the Firebender councilmen want to cover it up because they predict that if word got out that one of the leading members of the United Republic was a bloodbender, it would destroy their credibility. However, they are too late, as the episode would end with Ammon announcing on the radio that Tarlock was a bloodbender, who was so corrupt he was willing to kidnap even the Avatar to take control of the city, as his father Yukon did before him. But even the deadly art of bloodbending was no match for him. He proclaims that the city is rotten to the core, and very soon everything is going to change. In episode 13, it of course starts out with Korra recovering and telling Tenzin about her visions of Aang. asking what happened to Yakone, and Tenzin tells her that he escaped prison with the help of his former allies, and disappeared off the map. Korra tries to meditate to see Aang again, but isn't able to. Meanwhile, the whole city is suspended in fear of what's going to happen next. Mako and Asami are not having relationship trouble, unlike in the original, and are doing fine. Jinora asks Korra what it was like to see visions of Aang, and says she always wished she could go into the spirit world, because we need at least a little foreshadowing of what will happen in Season 2. Meanwhile, at the council meeting, 4 remaining council members discuss the necessity for bodyguard protection, with Raiko still not being allowed to vote. As they go their separate ways, they all of course get attacked, and the other Earthbender and Firebender councilmen actually put up a fight this time. Tenzin escapes, of course, and the episode plays out as it did originally, with added scenes showing lower-level politicians being kidnapped as well. Also, there is no Milo fartbending. After Tenzin and his family get away, with Lin staying behind and down in the airships, it actually shows them getting captured again, unlike how it happened off-screen in the original series, as they get cut off by planes. Meanwhile, there's some significant added content, with Ammon talking to Raiko after he's been captured, telling him his takeover of the city is not yet complete. The non-benders of the city still see Raiko as the face of the Equalists, so Ammon tells Raiko to announce on the radio that Ammon is in control of the city now, and he will lead the Equalists into a new era of justice and equality. However, Raiko of course refuses, but Ammon brings Raiko's wife out, holding a sword to her neck, and in the end he gives in and makes the announcement, after which Ammon throws him in prison, meaning he is now in control of the city, and the episode ends there. In episode 14, it starts off with announcements being made all over the city that people are free to carry on their normal lives, but bending is illegal, and benders face severe restrictions and curfews unless they go to Ammon to get their bending taken away. We of course see Lin getting her bending taken away from her, and then an enormous line of people forcefully being brought to Ammon. Then of course General Iroh receives the message and announces that he will be making his way to Republic City soon to put down the uprising. There are more scenes of the non-bending citizens of Republic City reacting to everything that has happened, with many praising Ammon for what he has done, as they finally feel like they are on equal footing, while many others are fearful of what will happen when the military arrives in the city. The Equalists would continue pumping out their propaganda to the citizens, however, trying to assuage their fears, and Ammon is paraded around in an airship like a god, while the statue of Aang is blown up, and it doesn't get an Ammon mask taped onto it, because that was just silly. Also, there should be a speech given by the lieutenant to the people about how he was a man born with nothing, and had unfulfilled dreams of equality. But then Ammon showed up and showed him his true purpose in life, to bring about true equality, not just to Republic City, but to the world. And that Ammon's godlike power over benders is proof that the spirits have blessed him, and made his goals sacred. Hiroshi gives a much less religious speech about how the era of bending is over, and science and technology will move everyone to the future together. It is then announced that a special rally will be held on the day of the winter solstice. Then, of course, Iroh's ships arrive, and get jumped by the Equalists from above and below, with the ships having more advanced weaponry than just tubes for aiming fire blasts. And General Iroh should get more badass scenes taking out a bunch of the planes using lightning bending before the fleet gets annihilated. And Asami is horrified looking at how many people end up dying. Also, since Korra and Iroh are actually cousins in my rewrite, they would know each other beforehand, and Korra would ask him how the Fire Lord is doing. They would all be hiding out from the Equalists with an amalgamation of very different people, some benders and non-benders, some former gang members, and those who want Ammon taken down for taking away their bending. Overall, I'm just trying to put more of a focus on how the actual citizens in the city feel about Ammon's movement in my rewrite. Then, of course, Iroh would make a plan to contact Commander Bumi, who he mentions is somewhat of a mad genius, and to take out the airplanes, while Korra stays back, saying she can't run anymore and will do what she can to stop Ammon. Bolin says he will go with Korra, but Iroh says he needs an earthbender to take out the runways, so Mako says he will keep Korra safe and have her back. The episode would end with Korra and Mako meeting up with Tarlock, who reveals that he is Ammon's brother. In episode 15, Tarlock's tragic backstory would be revealed, but with a few changes. Ammon should not be doing his whole equalist plot because he actually wants other people to be treated equally. Although he was once kind, he was driven mad by the obsession with power his father instilled in him, and the incredible powers bending offered him, and thought the best way to become invincible was to learn how to take other people's bending away, and never have it be revealed that he had bending himself, so it wouldn't be stolen from him like Yakone's. He was manipulating the masses' discontent at the oppressive system in place to bend them to his own will and create a society of non-benders, where he possessed the most powerful form of bending out there. Before Notok leaves Tarlock, he tells him that he loves him and hopes they will meet again aligns with his goals. Yakon's last words to his son Tarlock before he dies should also be, "You were always nothing but a disappointment," which is what would spur Tarlock on to wanting to prove that he could one day rise up and accomplish what his father couldn't. Tarlock should also mention that he is probably in that particular location, hidden away from everyone, so that he won't let it spill that he is Ammon's brother. Also, since it is never really explained how Ammon can use bloodbending to take away a person's bending in the original series, Tarlock should hypothesize that there is a physical component to bending, which is how people are able to temporarily block it by hitting pressure points on the outside of the body. So just imagine what someone who can control the inside of a person's body could do, permanently blocking one's chi. Korra also wonders how Ammon gained such a fine level of spirituality and who he was taught by. Before Korra and Mako leave him, Tarlock says that he has nothing left, and his goal, which wasn't even his in the first place, has been ripped from him by a brother who hasn't even talked to him. And he asks them to hand him some rope from outside of the cell, but Korra refuses. Meanwhile, at the airship runway, it was just stupid that Team Iroh walked into the electric fence, and Asami should have been able to figure out what was going on and rerouted the electricity from a section of the fence, so that they can get in, and they can come in swinging, fighting off a ton of Equalists before getting captured, rather than just getting captured immediately like in the original. The hole in the electric fence that was made will also explain how Naga would be able to get into the runway to rescue Team Iroh. At the Equalist rally, Ammon says that harmonic convergence will be upon them soon, where all the planets will align, and takes it as a sign that the world is going through a drastic change soon. And when Korra goes to rescue everyone, Ammon actually does manage to take away Janora's airbending before Korra helps everyone escape, meaning by this point Tenzin is the only airbender left. And as a bit of an ironic joke to point out how different the legend of Korra is from its predecessor, after they escape, Milo should shout, "Revolution!" after which Korra responds that they're actually trying to put down a revolution. Ammon corners Korra but doesn't use his bloodbending on her because there was really no reason to, since he is savage enough to take on any bender, and he gets a hold of Korra and takes away her bending easily, and Korra lets out a scream rather than that weird exhale in the original. And the episode ends there. In episode 16 is the grand finale, and like in the original, Iroh takes out the planes and Asami takes down her father. Before she does, she tells him that he was lying when he said that this was a peaceful revolution, and the weapons he made were being used to kill a lot of people, and many more would die on both sides during this revolution. This time we actually see Commander Bumi making his arrival to Republic City. In the original series, the finale was one of the most underwhelming things I've ever experienced. They hype up Bumi, and he arrives after Ammon has already run away, and everything is fine. No, in my version, this is how things go. After Korra's bending is taken away, Mako shows up and tries to shoot lightning at Ammon, but he deflects it away from him with, like he did with Lightning Bolt Zolt. However, Mako is prepared for that, as he redirects the lightning through electrical wires to come around and hit Ammon straight on. Then he runs away with Korra, and only now does Ammon use bloodbending to stop them, since he is critically injured, and he says that he's still able to move by using bloodbending to animate his body. However, of course, his lieutenant catches him in the act, and it is much more clear that Ammon killed him in my rewrite, snapping his neck with bloodbending. While Mako is restrained by his bloodbending, Korra socks him in the face, cracking his mask, but Ammon just laughs, saying how Korra is completely useless without her bending, as are all the other easily manipulated fools he brought under his command. And Korra breaks down in tears, but still doesn't give up and tries to fight Ammon anyway, and of course unlocks her airbending in the process. When Ammon grabs her with his bloodbending, she briefly enters the Avatar state, breaking free and kicking him out of the building. But he doesn't just reveal himself as a waterbender and run away. Instead, a battle ends up playing out, with Bumi's forces showing up and catching Ammon by surprise. He demonstrates his military prowess by outsmarting Ammon and moving troops underwater and disguising them amongst the citizens. And he crushes Ammon's defenses and is defeating the Equalists, shouting, "Let it be known that you were brought down in the end by one of your own people, Ammon. And his name is Bumi!" Ammon, who grabs his mask back on and has blood dripping down his face, tries to salvage the situation and lead his followers against Bumi, using his bloodbending on the soldiers subtly to try not to trace it back to him. But he gets overwhelmed with Tenzin and Mako also fighting him, and his mask breaks, revealing the blood was actually just the makeup dripping off, and he is pushed so far that he is forced to use waterbending, and his loyal followers who were fighting and dying for him lose faith and give up. Then the military gains control of the city with Bumi doing his famous yell after victory is declared, and Ammon goes back to fetch his brother. While out on the water, Ammon apologizes for taking Tarlock's bending, but says that he might be able to take him to someone who can know how to get it back, and says that with the two of them together they can return to Republic City and conquer it successfully one day. But to break the cycle, Tarlock of course kills both of them. Of course, back with Korra, she is incredibly traumatized after losing her elements other than air, and her friends try to comfort her, and Asami's friends try to comfort her after, her dad almost tried to kill her. Rather than saying, "I love you," Mako thanks her for saving him from Ammon, saying she is incredible and that he will always have her back. And in my rewrite, Korra does not meet Aang and all the other avatars and get her bending back immediately. That was complete and utter bullshit, and I'm erasing it. Instead, Korra will only have airbending to use for almost the entirety of Season 2. This also means that Lin, Jinora, and almost everyone else who lost their bending aren't getting it back yet. And there is also a scene where Jinora is off and Tenzin sees her, seeming like she is playing with an imaginary friend. Tenzin comes out to talk with Korra about what happened, and Korra remarks on how ironic it is that she saw visions of Aang, went into the Avatar state, and performed airbending for the first time, all of which she had been trying to do, but she also lost so much. Tenzin says that his father had a famous quote, "When we hit our lowest point, we are open to our greatest change." And in the end, it is Tenzin who inspires Korra to accept what happened to her and decide to push forward and accept her new situation as the Avatar and do whatever she can to learn airbending and get back into fighting shape. Meanwhile, back in Republic City, we actually see how the citizens are reacting to the end of the revolution, being absolutely crushed and not wanting things to go back to the way they were. Many insurrectionists are taken to jail while the council members are freed, and with all the chaos going on, other leaders of the United Republic come to the city to have a discussion on what to do next, as it is chaos in the city and thousands of people are without their bending. It is also mentioned how all across the country, and not just in the city, there are equalist protests and insurrections, and something must be done. Roiko says that the conditions that the city was in led to things getting as bad as they did, and that things need to change to prevent something like this. Tenzin agrees, saying that the non-bending citizens' gripes need to be listened to, and the governing process needs to be much more democratic, with leaders being elected popularly, and not by a small council that favors bender representatives. In the end, the leaders mostly agree, especially considering many of them, including the other two council members besides Tenzin, are non-benders themselves now, and plan to disband the council in favor of a mayor and a president, and Korra, showing her growth, should also vouch for this plan, saying it is the right thing to do. At the end credits scene, we see the scene from the opening of the Season 2 premiere, where that boat gets attacked by a spirit, teasing what will come next in the season. And that, ladies and gentlemen, was my full rewrite of The Legend of Korra Season 1. I hope you all enjoyed it, and please stay tuned as I will be coming out with a full rewrite of Season 2 in the future, which will certainly be no easy task, but I will get through it, don't you worry. I hope you enjoyed watching. Be sure to like, share, comment, subscribe. This has been the Aromantic Shipper, and I will see you next time. And as always, remember, just because you can't feel love doesn't mean you shouldn't want other people to. Bye.